Sorry, this is an intermission because that clip is just too long, so you can take a break. Now, this doesn't have to be done only in black and white. It will be for us for the first assignment, and I think the second assignment, but the same principles apply in color. So this is Boris Becker, for those of you who are tennis fans, not that guy. He's kind of boring, honestly, but this is a really good example of just using color as a compositional device, right? So here we have some shapes, but that door over there, it's red and it stands out. If it was yellow, the composition would not be as compelling. Miki Kohara, much more interesting. Also working in color. This picture, it's almost as if the color image is monochrome. You know, like there's not a lot of strong different colors in the same way that there is in this. But if we look at how it's working, right? So we have these lines, oops, I guess they're over there. These lines here of these bricks coming in over here, right? We have this line here of the edge of the wall that comes down right to her head. We have this line over here tracking around right also to her face, sort of coming from this anonymous motion blur man coming up here. All the lines in the picture draw us in right to her head, right? Everything about it is just like pulling us right to that single focal point, which then goes back out again, sort of following this idea of her vision that bends around toward the sky. So there's this sort of like weird amorphous connection between the two of them. And then there's this moment where you realize that the sort of the thing we're assuming that she's looking out over there, you sort of realize that there's this bandage there, right? That she has an eye patch on, that side of her, the side that we cannot see, also cannot see either. And so this is a little weird where I'm like, hi. All right, better. So all of this moment, all this heat, the way that all these lines and angles, everything is pulling us right in there to this face, which then directs us back out, and then you have that realization that there's a blindness there. So we are putting all this heat on there only to have it thwarted or sort of turned back in a way that I think is really interesting. So again, not black and white, it is in color, but it's still primarily using not the color itself as a way to define different shapes like Becker is. It is using color in there to set a mood, right? This is sort of an antiseptic, the greeniness, the yellowiness across the whole picture. This is not a like happy-go-lucky springtime puppies, bunnies. This will be a segue. Picture. Hey, bunnies. So another thing with composition that we can talk about, subjective stuff, is the quality of light. So this is a picture by Ann Geddes. If you don't know Ann Geddes, oh, you're lucky. This is a picture of a baby dressed up like a bunny, right? It is soft, fuzzy, happy, fluffy subject. And the light that is landing on this bunny is also soft, fuzzy, happy, fluffy light, right? There is not a lot of drama to it. It is soft. It is overall. It is descriptive. Light, similar to color, right, will tend to set an emotion to things. Here we have very different light. So this is a still from Arsenic and Old Lace, a movie from 1944 with Peter Lorre. If you don't know Peter Lorre, he's, I mean, that's him over there. That's what he looks like. He's in a lot of great horror movies, German movies, good time. This light, right? This light is very much setting a mood that is different from this, right? So you have this stark shadow, these deep contrasts, right? Big areas of just like complete blackness, absence of description. This is not light which is showing you something as much as it is light that is trying to evoke something. It is hiding things. It is showing you bits of stuff. It is leaving mystery. That's what this lighting is all about. So again, subjective composition thing, right? You can talk about, well, what is the lighting doing? What is the mood that the lighting sets? How is it trying to evoke a particular feeling in your viewer? Is it soft, happy, fuzzy bunny, descriptive light? Again, that can be good, that can be bad. Is it much more dramatic, right? Is it the sort of like dark shadows, light highlights, very contrasty, things are sort of hidden behind other things? Both strategies that can work, but they come with a particular mood or meaning that they bring to the photograph. Hitler. So we talked about graphic composition, right? We talked about lines, angles running through the frame, the way that those can direct your eye through the picture. We talked about color, right? How those other strategies also obviously work in color, but also how color itself, in addition to just creating pattern through light and shadow, how color itself can be used as a compositional effect. We talked a little bit about the quality of light and the mood that it can set. But another really important thing in a photograph is our own understanding of what's depicted in it, right? Again, these are subjective criteria, meaning they are from an individual. It is impossible for me to look at this photograph and not see it being Hitler, right? There is not a moment where I look at this photograph and my reaction is thinking about composition first, or lighting first, or, you know, oh, look, that belt buckle. Like, no, it's always, 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 hey, that's fucking Hitler. This is something which, just get rid of Hitler, I don't want to see him anymore. This is something which is part of my understanding of culture, of history. This is not something that I like sprang from the womb with, right? This is my cultural knowledge informing the way that I read a photograph. This is going to happen to every photograph that you make. This is happening every time you look at a photograph. And it is in some ways the hardest part to control and also to be aware of in ourselves and to think about it for our audience. This is a duck, right? Adobe duck. This duck will probably evoke different reactions in different people, right? Some of you may be thinking of Ernie and Bert. Rubber Ducky. It's a great song, very catchy, no one hear it. For me, this duck is the Adobe like stock image duck. Bunch of Adobe programs in the 90s, at least in my memory. This duck came along and was like clip art that came with it, right? So I cannot look at this duck and not think about 1990s computer programs, right? Do you think about 1990s computer programs when you look at this duck? I can almost guarantee no, right? So if I want this picture to be about that, I'm going to have to do some extra work. I'm going to have to put in some additional context. I'm going to have to tell you, as I did right now, why it means that to me. Also a duck, right? So this duck, I was teaching a class at the International Center for Photography, oh, I don't know, years ago. And I showed this image talking about composition because for me, my background was in architecture, and this duck is really, really important within the context of architectural theory and criticism. This is the sort of, the decorated shed, I think. I don't know, it's been so many years. But this idea of the form of the building embodying sort of three-dimensionally this big sort of like meaning, telling you what it is by its shape. And so for me, that's what this is, right? I look at this, I think about, you know, reading architectural history, trying to write architectural theory, papers, super boring. And I showed this in class, and I had a student who was like, oh, that's my uncle's restaurant. I had to work there in the summer. It was terrible. It was like hot and sweaty, and like I smelled like grease all the time. And so that was super interesting for me, right? Because here's this totally idiosyncratic, right? Meaning like, particular to, this individual's experience, like not something I can really predict. Um, Idiosyncratic reaction to this photograph that I would not have, right? There is no moment where I would have the reactions to this photograph that this student did. Um, and that's true of all the photographs we make, right? It's impossible when we are making a photograph, we go back, we look at that photograph. For example, it's impossible to disentangle our own memories of making the picture from the experience of viewing it, right? Every photograph that we take is acting in some ways like a snapshot does, right? This sort of marker for a previous lived experience. In the same way that a photograph of Thanksgiving, right? If I go back and I'm like, oh, here's a photograph of my Thanksgiving dinner, that's interesting to me because it reminds me of all those people and like, oh, there's Uncle Bob, and that was right before he like got too drunk and fell off the chair, and that was hilarious. But to other people, they're like, okay, well, who are these like people sitting around eating fucking cranberries, right? Nobody cares. That's why looking at other people's vacation pictures, family pictures is so much more boring, right? Like incredibly boring. Like don't make people look at them. And why it's sort of harder to take a good one because you have to have something that is universal rather than just a marker to remind you of something that you've experienced. So as you go out and you make your own pictures, this is the hardest, honestly, the hardest part, right? The graphic composition, like lines, framing, tone, color, light, um, all of that, I feel like we can teach you all of those things. Give us a semester. We'll get it. But this idea of what am I bringing to the photograph, right? What parts of what I'm thinking about this image are within me? What is my audience going to see when they look at the photograph, right? Who is my audience? How are they going to interpret it? How are they going to understand it? How can I craft my photograph in such a way that they can see the thing I want them to understand? And that's going to be an ongoing project to learn how to do that for your entire time at FIT and probably for the rest of your life. How to make a picture where the meaning that your viewer gets out, right, is the meaning that you put into it. There's always going to be stuff that you can't control, right? I'm going to look at a picture of a dog. I'm going to be like, it's going to make me sad because it looks like the dog that, we had when I was a kid and that like one night went crazy and ate both my parents, right? And I'm going to be like, oh, this dog, right? Like you can't control that. So there's always going to be some stuff that is just outside of the realm of what we can control. And you have to accept that, right? If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I saw that picture and I had XYZ reaction, right? You can't say, no, you didn't, because they fucking did. Like, come on. But you want to understand why, right? Can you do the photograph differently, right? Is that thing that they're getting from it, like you put the photographs out in the world and you lose control over them to a degree. Other people are going to see them in different ways. But how can you craft the image to convey the information, the meaning, the emotions that you want? And how can you be aware as you are making the images of what your viewers are going to bring to them, right? This is why being culturally not a moron is important, right? It's important to know, like, okay, I'm going to show this to people from all over the world. How can I do that in a way that is going to be meaningful in a useful fashion or in an important fashion, in a significant fashion to this wider group of people, right? How can I not do something like boneheaded that someone from Sweden is going to look at it and be like, whoa, that's super offensive, right? Or closer to home, like how can you do something and not be like, hey, racist, don't do the racist shit, the fuck? That's going to be a struggle, right? Hopefully not the racist thing. Hopefully you can not be racist. That would be great. But this idea of making meaning, understanding meaning in your pictures and from the standpoint of your viewers is super important. So that's subjective criteria. Hopefully between objective criteria, how you point your camera, how you expose your thing, how you get the color right, and these things of graphic composition, angles, framing, axes, sort of lines, whatever, through the picture, lighting, how that can evoke mood, and then perhaps most difficult, what your audience is going to bring culturally and personally to those images. Between all that stuff, we will now have a language to start talking about our photographs. All right.